Don't waste your time trying to make people care about coral reefs. Coral reefs. I bet you came here this morning hoping I would talk about them. They are essential to marine life, and you may know that they are being destroyed in many places. And there are nonprofits out there that are committed to saving them. The director of one of these nonprofits was getting coached by a fundraising expert. And the director of this nonprofit asked this question: how do we get more people to care about the coral reefs that are being destroyed? Don't, the expert said. That would be a waste of your time. The data is clear. People who care about coral reefs will give you some of their money to save them. But the people who want to be seen caring about the coral reefs will give more money than you can imagine. And then you are free to use that money to preserve them. People will give where there is status to be gained or preserved. People are motivated more by a desire to be seen giving than they care about the effects of their giving. Does this ring true to you? We're going to explore it together this morning. Jesus seemed concerned about this kind of giving because in Matthew chapter 6, verse 1, he says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. It was certainly enough of an issue for Jesus to make this the heart of this whole center section in this famous sermon. I want to tell you a story about the time someone tried to buy me a house. Actually, that's not totally true. Someone didn't try to buy me a house. What I mean is 20 years ago, someone bought a house and then tried to give it to Jane and me as a wedding gift. It's an intense gift. One that we knew we had to turn down. Because we knew the person wasn't trying to meet our needs. We honestly didn't need a house at the time. We were young with no kids and 2 jobs and actually a little bit excited to struggle a bit, to build a life together. We didn't ask for a house. And if or when Jane and I were ever ready to buy a house, we would probably need some help and would ask for it. But this gift, it wasn't about us. And it definitely wasn't a gift. We had to turn it down because we knew that this someone was going to blow their trumpets in the streets about it. Like, making sure that everyone else could see that they were the ones who bought us this house. And here's what I couldn't have actually anticipated at that young of an age. We turned down this house thinking that it would put a stop to any trumpet blowing. We didn't expect the trumpets to blow anyway. Can you believe I bought Curtis and Jane a house, and they were so ungrateful for what I did that they refused to accept it? For years, this was the story, blasted in the streets. You may have heard it, so that they might be praised by others. They received their reward. Fast forward 10 years. Jane and I have 2 adorable kids, and we have only one income because Jane had decided for this season, we had decided Jane would stay home with the girls. And we had survived for a couple years at that point with only one car. But the situation was getting a little bit harder as our girls were getting older and the car seats and all the things we needed. And some in our church family had heard us begin to share just this need as a prayer request. And we were in need of a reliable car, and we were asking God to provide. And this is when someone came to me and just gently asked if we might be open to the gift of a car. And I'll just tell you, I was hesitant. A car is a big gift. And you know, I had been given a big gift before, but this brother told me. There was an older airplane mechanic who was getting rid of an older car that he had taken incredible care of. And there was no pressure at all, he said. But if we were open to it, their small group wanted to go in on it together. And we'd like to do it anonymously, he said. He had me at anonymously. And that's how we got our old Toyota Avalon, the one that we drove for years until it got crushed by a Suburban. But it did well. Wasn't going to hold up to a Suburban. But this is a story I have told many times, most of the times without any names, so that our Father in heaven can be glorified by this bright light, the good work of his children. And I've never once heard anyone who contributed to this gift tell the story or claim any credit for it. You can feel the difference between these two experiences. Can't you? And I want to make this personal for all of us. And so I want you right now to consider, what have you been given? I admit, a house and a car are a bit ridiculous and probably show just how insanely privileged I have been in my life. But it might not be a car or a house for you, but it's probably something. I am sure that you know both of these experiences, right? Like, what have you been given that felt like it was more for the giver than it was for you? And what have you been given that felt like a true and genuine gift for you to meet your real need? I just want you to sit with this for a second. Two different kinds of gifts. And would you just do this, just so that I can tell that you're tracking with me? Would you, I'm not going to call on you, but would you raise a hand? Let's do this. Raise your left hand, so mirroring my right hand, if you can think of an example of the first kind of gift, a gift that was actually for someone else. It was for the giver. And then raise your right hand, mirroring this hand, when you can think of a gift that was given as just a genuine gift for you. And so when you have yours, okay, I see some hands popping up. Can you think of both? One, both? Okay? Okay? Cool. Thanks. The fundraising expert told the Coral Reef Advocate that people give to be seen. They give to improve or maintain their social status. And so if you want to save the coral reefs, you can't make people care about coral reefs. You need to make giving to the coral reefs a status symbol. Right? Translate that to our daily lives, and the fundraising expert might say to us, stop trying to get people to care for those who are in need. It doesn't matter if they care. What matters is if they give, and people give if it makes them look good. And so make giving to people in need a sign of status, something that the cool people do, something that the important people do. Rising is what matters to motivate giving, not caring. Ooh, I wonder how this sits with you. Because I don't think that the fundraising expert is wrong. At least not according to the pattern of our world. This is exactly how our world works. Every large building with someone's name plastered on it is a sign that people will throw their money away, totally useful money, in order to be seen by others. This is the way our world works, and it is into this world where caring is less important than rising, where Jesus announces that a whole new world has come. Jesus announces it doesn't have to be that way. You were made for more. And it's because of this that you get a story that I heard this week from Leah, a story about two boys named Wyatt and Leo. Wyatt is a Christian kid, a freshman in high school. Wyatt went out for the wrestling team. And being new to it, he's not necessarily a great wrestler, but one day his school is at this wrestling meet, and the other school had a wrestler named Leo. And Leo is a student with special needs, and he loves being part of the wrestling team, and he attends every practice and is always there, but has never wrestled a match. And so at this meet, Leo's coaches, they come over to Wyatt's team, and they just quietly ask the coaches if they had anyone on their team who could give Leo a match. They were asking for a student willing to let Leo experience a win. As the coaches looked down their team, they saw Wyatt, a humble kid, a kind kid. And they quietly pulled Wyatt aside and they asked him to give Leo a match. And as Leo won the match, his team and the crowd from their school that was there, fans, they came and they surrounded him on the mat and they cheered for him and they celebrated him. And there wasn't a dry eye in the room among those who knew what this meant to Leo. And we've heard stories like this before. These are great and powerful stories. Someone willing to give to someone else in need. But what makes this story different, what makes this a sign of the kingdom of heaven is ninth grade Wyatt. Because his teammates come up to him after this match and they ask him, "How did you lose?" Because they didn't necessarily know Leo had special needs, but they could tell Wyatt was probably the better wrestler. How did you lose? They wanted to know. And Wyatt just shrugged and moved on. In a hyper-competitive sport where winning is everything, winning is your status in it, Wyatt was willing to lose for Leo. And in losing, he chose not to explain or justify himself. He did nothing that would get himself praised. This is the heartbeat of our passage this morning. There is a way of doing what is right, a way of doing the right things, but in a way that actually can rip relationships apart. that there is a wrong way of doing what is right. Jesus calls these wrongdoings of right out, and he calls out those who do them, and he refers to them as hypocrites. We know that word. We use it. The hypocrites in the synagogues and in the streets. They give to those in need to be praised by others, Jesus says. They love to stand and praise so that they may be seen by others, Jesus says. They disfigure their faces when they fast so that they can be seen by others. See, being seen by others is this great poison to right relationships. I'm thinking about all the different places where this is on display right now. It's interesting to me how popular and central reality TV is for us as a culture, as a society. Relationships on full display. Relationships lived out in front of a watching world. What changes in a relationship when you know people are watching you? One of the places where this is having a huge effect is Congress. And this is not going to be a political statement, so don't worry, you can breathe. It's actually just a public statement. Before cameras were in the great halls of Congress, Republicans and Democrats could debate issues. They could discuss matters honestly, candidly, openly. But maybe you've watched a little bit of a congressional hearing at some point in the last decade. And what do you see? You see performance. You see grandstanding. You see people making lofty speeches intended to get cut into clips that will get spread over the internet. And so what you have are elected representatives who don't talk to each other. They don't talk with each other. There are no right relationships in Congress. Relationships are all turned into a public show, kind of like watching WWE wrestling. You have your guy, and you know who they're facing off against, and you cheer for your guy, and you boo the other guy or gal. But if you watch, they only talk at each other or over each other, and it's all for status. To improve their status, to maintain their status. I don't know if you know this. It's actually become the norm for an elected official, a newly elected official moving to D.C. It used to be that your first hire would be your legislative team, right? You're a lawmaker, and you would hire a team who helps you write laws. It's no longer the first hire. First hire is now a communications team. Elected officials care more about how they look to people than writing laws that help people. It's been argued that cameras in Congress might be one of the single most destructive forces to a working democracy that we have encountered. We'll see. Time will tell. Jesus is concerned with this. All of this. That we would live out our faith as a public show. Because Jesus isn't interested in a show. Jesus is obsessed with relationships. And first, he's concerned about our relationship with God, God who we call our Father. And second, he's concerned about relationship with God's other children, those who are our brothers and sisters. And just notice the three issues that Jesus brings up in our passage, right? Prayer. Well, what is prayer? But relational communication between us and God. And fasting. What is fasting except a humble seeking of God? And what is giving? But our loving response to God's generosity to us. These three practices of right relatedness, they're all relational. These are core ways of being in relationship with God and with others. And I want you to notice something. Jesus uses this word hypocrite to criticize the praying, fasting, and giving that some people are doing. And it might not be obvious, but Jesus defines hypocrisy differently than we usually define it, right? We tend to think about hypocrites as those who say one thing and do another, right? So to us, a hypocrite would be somebody who's always talking about prayer and how much they pray, but they actually don't ever pray. A hypocrite is somebody who talks about fasting is important. Christians fast, but they don't actually fast. A hypocrite talks about giving, but doesn't actually give. This is what we think of as hypocrisy, but this isn't what Jesus is addressing. See, to Jesus, if you never talk to God, if you never seek God with humility, if you never give to people in need, you actually aren't even on his radar here. Because there's not even a working relationship to get right or wrong. There is no relationship. And so let me just offer a word. If this is you today, Jesus has a very different invitation than what we find in our passage. Jesus wants to introduce you to his Father. And this morning he is saying, come and know him and listen to him and speak with him and be saved and be set free. If this is you this morning, if you are here and you don't have a relationship with God today, I hope you'll start one. God is pretty fantastic. And as a father, unrivaled. And I just want you to know, I'm here to talk about this with you. Others are here who could help you. But it's not what Jesus is dealing with in this sermon. Jesus is talking to probably most of the rest of us. Jesus is talking about people who talk about prayer all the time and pray all the time. It's just that a lot of their praying is being done in front of others so that they can be seen. He's talking about people who say they need to fast and then who also do fast, but fast in ways that let other people know that they're fasting. And Jesus is talking about people who talk about giving to those in need, and then they also give. They just make sure that the people are watching or people hear about it when that giving happens. See, to Jesus, hypocrites are actually people who say and do the same things. Their words align with their actions. It's not exactly how we think of hypocrisy, but that's what Jesus is saying. It's just that their actions are wrong. They're doing it wrong. They're doing it for the wrong reasons. Their actions miss the mark. And how do their actions miss the mark? Well, God, our Father, wants nothing more than for us to enjoy a relationship with him. A real relationship where we know him and where we are known by him. If you have ever had a real relationship with anyone, then what you know is that the reward of that relationship is the relationship itself. Right? That there is a genuine joy and fullness that comes from the relationship. The relationship isn't a means to something else, right? It is the gift of knowing somebody deeply and intimately. It is the gift of being known and seen by another. That is the reward that makes life worth living. Actually, this is the treasure that we have in heaven. Our treasure is a Father who loves you more than you could ever know. A Father who gives you good gifts. A Father who knows your every need before you even ask. A Father who offers you words of wisdom and counsel. A Father who gave his very life for you. That Father lives in heaven. And is your treasure. This is God's heart, that we might be his treasure. But we can easily forget what a treasure we have in him. And we discover that there is a weird kind of status, especially if you've been in the church for any amount of time, of praying profoundly, of sacrificing publicly, and in praiseworthy giving. And if we're not careful, we can start to live for these earthly rewards. Rewards that cannot last, that will not satisfy. And so let me turn the words, the advice of this fundraising expert I started with around. He said, rising in status is more important than caring for those in need. I hope in your core, like in your gut, you just feel like this is garbage advice, right? That nonsense has no place in the kingdom of heaven with our Father. It is better to care than to rise. Our social status, it can be stolen. It can be destroyed. But God's love for us, it is a treasure that cannot be taken away. It cannot be destroyed. It's heaven and our Father who lives there, the treasure where your heart is.